Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This is episode number 71 of the podcast. I know, we're already up to 71. This week I have 8 new LitRPG reviews for you folks at home. I'm trying out some new equipment here at the podcast, so hopefully this is going to be a much better quality of sound and video. But let me know what you think in the comments on the podcast if it works out better for you. The first new release and review, though, is going to be Alpha Company. That's going to be Alpha Company World Book 3. Then after that, it's going to be Apocalypse 2020, a Wasteland lit RPG. Then An Adventurer's Heart, Book 2 of the Adventures on Brad. And then the Alchemy World Enter Therapy, a lit RPG adventure. And then City of Champions Online, Issue 1. And then Shards of Reality, a lit RPG novel, Enter the Realm, Book 1. And then the Elven Captive Complete Collection. And finally, The Star Dragon, a fantasy lit RPG, Dragons of the New World, Book 1, which has a really fancy cover. But of course, we begin our show, though, with Lit RPG News. And in Lit RPG News, we are going to begin with, let's see how this is going to work right. Emerilia Book 1 is actually free in the United States and the UK until October the 1st. Codename Freedom is free until October the 1st as well. So those two books are totally free. Go pick them up. If you haven't read them, they're really quite good. I think both of them got at least 7s out of 10s from me. I enjoyed them both immensely. But go check them out. I think they might even got 8s. I can't recall off the top of my head, but they're really good. Out now. These are stories that are out now, but I have not had a chance to review them this week, including Starter Zone, the Revelations Chronicle Book 1, written by Chris Pavesky. And then The Laboratory, Futuristic Dungeon Core, written by Skylar Grant. And On the Lost Continent, Alter Game Book 2. Also, Chronicles of a PC Gamer Stuck Inside an RPG, Book 1, The Duelist. And Travail Online is also on. This is the third book in that series called Transcend. And Crisis at Clearwater, which is the book 2 of the Unexplored Cycle. Also be aware that this one has some sexual themes. At least I'm going to assume so according to the other 2 books in this series. Okay, new lit RPG audiobooks. We have Dante Dooms, The Star Dragon. That's right. The author put out an ebook and an audiobook at the same time. And also Hell to Bay, Ascend Online Book 1.5, which is a kind of a side novel in the series, written by Luke Tumalenko, friend of the podcast. Okay, in upcoming lit RPG, this is just where I read off the stories that are coming out in the next weeks and time frames in the future. Feel free to skip it if you don't want to, but there are some new additions to this list. Desert Runner is out October the 4th. Also out October the 5th is Shadow of the Rogue. On October the 6th, it'll be The Black Dragon, which is the second book in the Dragon King series. October the 11th, A Game with No Rules, Perimeter Defense Book 4. October the 16th, Fantasy Online Polonia. On the October the 16th as well, The Wizard, Dungeon Core Book 1. On the October the 20th, it'll be The Iron Dragon, Book 3 by Dante Doom. That's right, it has 3 books out within weeks of each other. On October the 23rd, it'll also be Nemesis, the Pangardia Online Saga. On the October the 24th, Emerilia Book 10, The Pantheon Moves. I don't have a picture for that. But this one's definitely new. October the 31st, Awaken Online Retribution, which is an Awaken Online side story. It's not Awaken Online 3, guys. I'm sorry to say. But this is something that happens between, I guess it's set after Book 2, but before Book 3. So it's also told about a character that is not the main character in the other Awaken Online series. So just be aware. But the author also mentioned that he's working very hard on Awaken Online 3. Please don't come with the pitchforks and the torches. Okay. Also, November the 1st, Redeemer of the Dead, which is book 2 in the Apocalypse book series. November the 8th, Desert Born, which is the Pateria Online book 2. November the 16th, Shatterlands book 3. And December the 4th, The Twilight Olives. Oh, and I totally skipped this. Sometime in November, Emerilia book 11. So there we go. On to new releases and reviews. Okay. In new releases and reviews, I am going to begin with Alpha Company, Book One. Alpha Company. This is the third book in the Alpha World series, written by Daniel Schienehofen, from the podcast. We actually did an author interview with him as well. You can go check that out at our website at LitRPGPodcast.com. It's also keepmypodcast.com. So there you go. I will read you the author's description. Rejoin Albert Twosold as his journey in Alpha World continues. He has two quests that still need to be resolved. One that deals with nobility, while the other is from the Dark Lord. Before he can deal with either of them, Mind Blown brings down the server as they're about to launch a mass-scale immersion testing phase. Gerald, Mary Sue, Karen, and Fluffball are four of the lucky ones selected for the testing phase. Gerald plans to drum up recruitment for the Guild Alpha Company during the meet and greet before the immersion test starts. The quartet of newly minted friends will meet for the first time in the real world. Will they get along, or will something force them apart before the game goes back online with them immersed? Welcome to Book 3 of Alpha World, Alpha Company. It is based on the newly minted Guild. That's kind of most of it. The author does have a little warning there saying the story does have adult themes. If you didn't like those adult themes for books 1 or 2, they're still here. So there you go. But it says there is adult content. There is no graphic sex scenes necessarily, but there is like allusions to it. There are references. There's some faded black stuff, but there are also sexual relationship concepts in here, including non-traditional relationships that are discussed very openly. So in the story, so if any of that is not designed for you, then the story is not going to be for you either. Okay, this story is 409 pages, $3.09. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. There are essentially three story threads in this novel. One, guild stuff, which includes recruiting, guiding newbies, new guild members, dealing with the jerks and any recruitment phase, plans to grow the guild, of course, contests, raid plans, cool things like that. Two, the second thread is going to be plot advancement, which is just talked about a little bit in the author's description, dealing with the nobles, an air thing, deadland stuff, some quests for the Dark One, and three, personal stuff with the main character, which includes polyamory stuff, dealing with psychological issues, and personal stuff with Karen and Fluff. And to be honest, it's that third thing that really kind of made this a great story for me. The first two are really cool. So there are new developments in there. The new guild stuff is actually kind of neat, and that for me personally, I'm not really a guild kind of person. Whenever I play MMOs or any online games, I never really join a guild. I've done it a couple times, and I've always regretted it. There's always like guild drama. The thing builds up, blows up eventually. And for the most part, I don't like playing with other players. Even though like existing in an MMO world with other players, I don't actually like to play with them all the time necessarily, or like at least long term. But I actually like this guild, and I would happily join the Alpha Company personally. The stuff they do is cool, and the recruitment, the organizational structures, the ways that they're getting their good members to level up and providing incentives for them to complete quests that better the digital world. All that stuff is really cool. Um, and of course, the main plot advances too. I'm not going to spoil anything, any of those points. Um, and on its own, those first two storylines are good enough to be a 7 out of 10 for me. I like the series though. However, it's that third thread that is just really cool and elevates it for me at least to a better score. Um, I'm not going to spoil well. I'm probably going to spoil a little bit too much, but I'll leave it right now. If you don't want to hear the spoilers, that it's good enough to be like 8 out of 10 for me. Now, I'm going to be talking about a few minor spoilers here. They're not major, but if you don't want to listen to it, just skip ahead a little bit on the podcast. Um, Okay, you've been warned. Okay, now the details about the third thread of personal development. It's I find it utterly fascinating. If I'm being honest, um, there are several frank discussions, mostly late in the story, about polyamorous relationships. Even though I'm personally not interested in that kind of relationship, I'm very much um, me and my wife. That's it, kind of thing. It was so utterly fascinating, even from like a sociological point of view of seeing these characters talking about it openly and honestly and heartfeltly. It was almost like I was getting kind of a transgressive peek into the pillow talk of like some couples or from a group of friends that I knew, and it was very interesting. Mostly because this is something I never thought about as far as like the complexities of it. and it was just really interesting to look at and to read. There is some sex stuff involved, but a lot of it's also just emotional. And each one of the people in this relationship or potential relationship, I should say, have their own physical needs, their own emotional needs, they have their own hangups, just like any other relationship. And the fact that it was the only way to kind of deal with it was to be frank and honest with each person as they were discussing it, like in late in the novel, was very much like, oh, that's kind of the only way I've ever had a positive relationship in my life is that those same discussions, just that now you're dealing with multiple peoples who all have their own individual needs. And it was, like I said, very cool for me to kind of see a relationship dynamic that I'd never considered for or ever been a part of, I guess. So, but again, it was as much about emotional needs as it was about, sexual desire kind of stuff. But that part was really interesting for me to kind of get a peek into. The second interesting aspect of the story that I thought kind of again elevated it is the psychological exploration rather of the past of several characters by exploring their memories. That's right. One of the things that the author's done in the books in the past is that when the main character goes to sleep, we relive some of his past memories, usually centered around the events that got him landed in jail. And I always thought that was cool. And the author is kind of taking this to another level, and that Stacia, the succubus, has awakened some dream memory walking power that allows her to explore someone's past memories with their permission, of course. And it's almost used as a psychological tool to help people and characters deal with their issues, no matter what they are. Because a lot of these issues are just tied to events that occur in our histories in our past and how we view those events and histories from our point of views, even if it's not how other people view them. And so, if you kind of want an idea what this is like, think of the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and kind of those memory explorations, except that it's a little less weird. And the revelations of these memories involve traumatic incidents in these characters' past, which is very intimate in a way. And again, there's some very serious revelations when this memory exploration occurs, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody. But it is definitely a great way of bonding the reader with these characters. If you like these characters, after you read these sections, you're probably gonna like them a lot more, just because it's kind of a sociological aspect of interpersonal relationships. When somebody reveals something to you, personal and intimate, you tend to like them more because it's a chance that they're taking that you're not gonna like them. And so the fact that they trust you enough creates an emotional shared bond, especially when you reveal things as well. And that kind of happens in this story in that um, I like these characters more when I feel more involved and um, I care about their well-being because of these revelations. And so, like I said, those two aspects really elevate the story for me a little bit beyond just good. Overall, I had a really good time reading the normal action adventure stuff, which is still there. The guild stuff added a nice extra layer of flavor and some new people to interact with and some new dynamics. However, again, it's that exploration and discussion of the polyamorous relationship and the psychological exploration through memory shifting that got it a better score because again, these are new things. These are things that make you think, and that's always a good thing for me. So for me, it gets a score of 8 out of 10. So good job. Okay, on to Apocalypse 2020, a Wasteland lit RPG story. Okay, it is 1997, and Brand is one of the very few people. I'm sorry, read you the author's description of this one, written by James T. Witherspoon. Um, it's 1997. That's right. The story is set in 1997. And Bran is one of the few people that gets to play the very exclusive new video game Apocalypse 2020. He sits in front of his computer monitor, and the world around him fades away. No more worries about school, his dad, or his future. He can ignore that life and let the game and his imagination take him to another. In the game, nuclear fallout has turned the United States into a post-apocalyptic hellhole filled with cannibal mutants, psychic bandits, and killer robots. Can Bran survive the big guns, fast cars, extreme violence, and permanent character death in this intense, action-packed little RPG? So there you go. Okay, this story is 397 pages, $4.99, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. Full disclosure, the author sent me an advance copy for review. I absolutely purchased it when it became available. And I kind of want to reiterate this because it bugged me until I figured it out. but the story is set in the past. It's set in 1997. So there are going to be some references in there that feel really dated, like a reference to Asking Jeeves, which was a search engine back then, and some like computer stuff like the game coming on like 7 CDs or something, which is also a thing that doesn't exist anymore. And but they're on purpose, so don't let them throw you off. Also, the game stuff is not set in virtual reality, but at a mouse and keyboard. But to be honest, I really didn't notice. It feels feel the story game elements feel very immersive. It's told from the perspective of the main character, so um, it almost feels like you're getting a VR experience without the headset and goggles. Like there's an occasional reference where it's like, oh, um, they're pixels on the screen instead of great images or whatever. But for the most part, it feels very immersive. At least to me, it did. Okay. The author describes this novel as a collective choose your own adventure story that he originally published on the Rural Road. He says, I mentioned it a few times, he told me that the readers didn't change the major plot points of the story, but they did determine how the main character would progress through the game by choosing the main character's game class and the skills he chose as he leveled. There were a few other choices that the readers in the Rare World made through like a survey or a list or whatever. But I can't tell you about them because it gets a little spoiler toward the end. Like some missions that they went on, like the main characters went on. Okay. As far as the actual novel goes, it was cool. I kind of liked it actually. The first few pages start off like a Mad Max scene, and that's intentional because this is supposed to be a post-apocalyptic video game story. With the main character Booth strapped to the hood of a car, being driven to his death by two madmen. He fails the strength check to break the rope. He fails a charisma check to stop them, to convince them to stop, but he succeeds in a dexterity check to loosen the ropes. Essentially, these checks in the game story show up as like percentages in the checks, and it reflects the chances for the main character to do a specific action. Um, if he's invested points in those skills and those stats, more likely to succeed. If he hasn't, it's less likely to succeed, and he'll fail, and there'll be consequences for it either way. If you've ever played Fallout, you'll be familiar with this kind of RPG mechanic. So there you go. And for the most part, the game stuff is really a lot like Fallout as far as like the actual mechanics. Let's see, the main character whose name is Brand plays the survivor named Booth on his dad's old PC. Um, he has to complete and survive in this game world to become stronger, complete quests. The class and game mechanics are going to be again super familiar for any who's played Fallout. You at each level, the main character gets a snap point to distribute and several class skills to choose that customize the character. And the last 8% of the novel are actually like a super detailed game novel. So if you're really into like how the author computed all the stuff, like formulas and a bunch of stat stuff, all that information is actually at the very end as like a the author calls it a game manual for Apocalypse 2020, which is the game. So he gives you the information, how he determines like skill checks and stuff. Um, Story wise, there are basically two arcs. The first is the game story where Booth goes on quest after quest to gain experience and play around with this amazing computer MMO with permadeath. The second is a real life storyline where Brand deals with his school bullies and the loneliness and not having friends in the new city that he and his father moved into. And honestly, the game stuff in the beginning is kind of slow and not that interesting until the author kind of makes you care about the main character by revealing things about him in his past. And that doesn't happen until um, about 8% at least, and then even then it's only like small details, and then gradually as the story goes on, the game the main character has to jump into the game to do school and homework and life stuff like that, and you gradually get more and more information about him and the other characters in the story, and then you start to feel for them and want them to succeed. But it honestly is kind of a slow build and a slow burn at the beginning. So if you find yourself not caring about the character at the beginning, kind of push through it. It's honestly worth it to me. I had a really good time reading the story. Um, and again, at the beginning of the story, the game is just escapism. It's fun and interesting, and but eventually, as the story goes on, it changes from that to a way to form social bonds with other players in the game and friendships. And there's even a little romance in the story if you're interested in that kind of stuff. It's a very cute romance. Um, see. Okay. And at about the 30% of the novel is when the story structure actually appears. Like there's an actual plot eventually in the story. It's not just daily adventures of. At the 30% of the story, the quests start to get a little more focused. And there's a whole plot there, which I'm not going to spoil. But the comic is actually well written. I enjoyed reading it. It's a very actiony kind of story. There's a whole variety of monsters, opponents for the main character in this group to face, and the tactics used as each mission progresses. Each mission kind of has different tactics, and depending on the composition of the group and the objectives of the mission, different skill choices and different ways of completing are done, including some non-violent ones, which I actually thought was really cool, because most of our stories are very action where you kind of kill a bad guy and steal the loot to get the item. And there were at least a couple missions in the novel where non-violent means are taken and the mission still succeeds. So I thought that was kind of neat. Okay. Also, well, one of the few complaints I kind of have with the story is that one, there's a cliffhanger ending, so be aware of that. Two, um, there there's a character who I thought just was very flawed and almost unnecessary. The character Lucas, he's set up as an antagonist, and it feels kind of forced. But that's like I said, kind of a minor complaint. Overall, I had a really good time with the story. It's a slow start, though. Be aware of that. It gets immersive once you start knowing about enough about Brand, the main characters, to empathize with them. And I enjoyed the story, but kind of remind me of Fallout, Mad Max, Borderlands, and you like the vibe of those kind of games, you're probably gonna like this story quite a bit. For me, get score 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to An Adventurer's Heart, Book 2 of the Adventures of Brad. So there you go. Sorry, I forgot to press the button. Okay. This one is 175 pages, $3.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, so be aware of that. Written by Tao Wong. It is book 2 in Adventures of Brad. I'll read you the author's description. Having returned from their time with the army, Daniel and Asan must now complete the dungeon in Karlak. To do so, though, they will need to get better gear, more skills, and higher levels. Taking quest, the pair must leave Karlak to travel across the kingdom of Brad and learn a few life lessons along the way. So there you go. Okay. Um, this is basically Daniel and Asan continue their daily adventures. That's a lot what the first book was. It was like the daily adventures of these two characters. And then towards the end of book 1, you got like a cool epic battle. But I kind of thought like, okay, that definitely makes up for a lot of the slower, daily adventure stuff in the beginning. But if you don't like daily adventure stories like Slice of Life or that's what I call them, daily adventure, where it's just adventure, adventure, adventure. This is what happened with the character as they progress, and there's no like overall plot, then you're probably not going to enjoy this one as much either. But if you really loved book 1, you're probably gonna like book 2. You might not like it as much. Like I said though, book 2 doesn't have anything like that invasion from book 1 to make it like extra interesting. It really is just daily adventures of Daniel and Asan, which is not bad. It's just be aware of what you're getting into in the story. There's dungeon diving, there's advancement of skills, interpersonal character development. There's a lot of that in here as well. And like I said, I had a good time. The first 30% is a little boring. Well, not boring, but like it's less exciting because in that section, the main character are traveling from one town to another, and anytime you get like an extended travel scene like that, it's hard to input excitement in there and action and adventure stuff. It's there still, just in smaller doses. But after that 30%, it's almost constantly quest after quest, battle after battle, fighting, and other good stuff. So it picks up the pace a little bit there. So there's technically nothing wrong with the story. There's nothing I didn't notice a lot of like spelling errors or grammars or anything like that. Um, it's I I wasn't bored with the novel. I wasn't super riveted either. This is very much one of those stories that you can pick up and put down without feeling any pressing need to continue it, and which is great for some people, not great for other people. For me, it wasn't as good as book 1. It gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Again, not a bad story though. Just not quite good, or 7, I should say. Okay. Next one is Alchemy. The Alchemy Worlds Enter Therapy, a LitRPG adventure. Okay, this one was written by Victor Justice, and produced by LitRPG Freaks. Okay, I will read you the author's description. You know what? Yeah, why not? Matthias Tenmo is a man with bad anger issues. After a tough childhood and a lifetime of petty crimes, he is arrested for a botched armed robbery and sentenced to a 5-year prison stretch. While serving his time, Matthias continues to display his antisocial behavior and total rejection of authority. The last straw will come when he injured one of the guards. As a result, he will be forced to take part in Dr. Calladay's rehabilitation project. Now, one of the test subjects in the new experiment, Matthias will be immersed in a virtual world where he will have to face and address his violent ways. Playing as a peaceful druid, he will be given a chance for redemption. However, upon entering the alchemy world, Matthias will quickly realize that this is not the stupid game he first thought it would be. Right off the bat, this will turn into a race for survival, and Matthias will have to learn to contain himself if he's to get out of there in one piece. Because if he always resorted to violence to solve his problems in the real world, here he is bound by the laws of the druids. Okay. It's 237 pages. Again, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. The main character, Matthias, is a violent criminal in jail. He's basically thrown in a fantasy VR game with a class built, with a prearranged class built of druid, and he's stuck there until the overseeing AI is basically satisfied that he's been rehabilitated. Um, he tries in the game initially to be as violent in the game as he is in the world, but the game punishes him physically with pain and also with the character set penalties. Under the guise like, "Oh, you've crossed your druid goddess" or something. Then he goes on to find a found, ultimately goes on a big massive quest, and that's kind of what the story is. There's also this secondary supernatural theme, kind of mid late in the story, where the game and a bunch of monsters in the real world are really quantum creations by a mad scientist monster thing. It's kind of convoluted, and it's not really well developed, even though it is there towards the end of the story. The story premise again had a lot of promise, but it's never really realized, unfortunately. I actually like the idea um, that the premise holds, in that the idea of a virtual reality prison merging with the idea of virtual reality rehabilitation. That's one of the things I really liked about the way the Shaman book went, was that it was an unusual setting, in that being stuck in the game was a form of punishment from the government, as far as like a prison sentence goes, instead of putting them in like an expensive, jail cell where they get 3 square meals a day, and they're housed at the cost of the taxpayer. Kind of put them in a storage pod with a bunch of nutrients and just stick them in a virtual world, which is a much lower cost solution. And this one kind of takes that to a next step, and that it also requires actual behavioral modification. Um, so I thought that was kind of interesting. But unfortunately, that kind of story thread disappears after about the 70% mark in the story, which is sad to me. After that, the main character kind of does whatever he wants, being violent, having antisocial behaviors, and really isn't guided by any kind of other source, which was kind of ruins the story concept for me a little bit. I think it would have been a much more interesting novel if it would have been more of a speculative commentary on where pre prisoner rehabilitation could go in the future. But that's me. That's not what this is. The RPG game mechanics and story exist, but most of the story kind of reads as fantasy portal fiction. There are items and monster descriptions, and the main character gets all the way to level 4. However, aside from that informational aspect of the story, the game mechanics don't really seem to matter. Like the main character levels, he and that's kind of it. And he gains levels. And that the levels don't really mean anything. He gets stat points that he distributes as he levels. But they don't change much for him. Like he'll increase his strength, increase whatever, but they don't change any of the things that he can do in the story. And that's what I mean by the game mechanics don't really mean anything besides being informational. Like, and by informational, he basically has a book in the story that when he points out a monster or an item, he gets like an item description, and that's kind of all the most with the game mechanics end up being for the reader, anyways. Overall, I was kind of disappointed that the story didn't make a better use of the virtual rehabilitation concept, and the rest of the novel was just kind of okay. It wasn't bad again by any means. It just wasn't like super awesome either. So I guess a score of 5 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Good concept, just not realized. Okay, on to City of Champions Online, Issue 1, Origin Stories. There we go. Written by Stuart Gross. Okay. Author's description. Having found the tragic truth that an art degree is worth less rather than the paper it's printed on, Jacqueline Jones is frustrated with her dead-end work as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, finding new ways to try and convince people that this week's 50-cent off sale is actually worth driving to the store. She's tried other MMORPGs, but they've all been fantasy based with a couple of sci fi games they're in. But then she wants something more, something super. Superhero VMMRs have had a subpar reception in the past, but then she heard about City of Champions Online for the first time. A developer partnered with a tabletop RPG maker. I'm going to skip the rest. This is long. Basically, the main character plays a superhero VR MMO. There we go. Um, this is 125 pages, 99 cents. It is not available in Kindle Unlimited. Again, this is a super awesome price point. Stuart Gross actually does really good world building and game mechanics stuff in his stories for the most part. He has a couple of the series out which are definitely more adult themed. I had a chance to talk to him at DragonCon, a few weeks ago, and he basically said like those other two novels are from the character perspective of like a chaotic evil character and a neutral evil character. And so this one, I'm not really sure what kind of characters. I would say it's probably neutral good. When yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of this character. Neutral good, maybe even chaotic good. But it's an interesting character. The game mechanics in the story are detailed, but they're also very much front loaded. I should give you a little warning though. This is a superhero themed RPG. It has political satire, which some reviewers didn't appreciate. It also deals with themes of racism. So if either one of those things make you uncomfortable, don't read this because they're very prominent through the majority of the story. About 90% of the story is told in game, and these are like really big themes. The last 50% of the story is actually a big glossary of game details, abilities, character descriptions. So also be aware of that. And also, there's a lot of cursing in this novel. It's for adults, like a lot of cursing. So there you go. As far as game mechanics go in the story, they're really front loaded. So like the author again has really detailed game mechanics in all the stories. In this one in particular, he uses a point based skill system. So instead of getting a bunch of levels to a character and a bunch of experience points every time, the characters are rewarded with special points that they can use to build their characters. And the first 14% of the story is just character development, character creation for the main character. And that goes out of his way to like detail every single power and every single disadvantage, advantage during character creation that the main character does to build her character in the superhero world, and it's super detailed. Unfortunately, after that 14% mark, the game mechanics start popping up a lot less, and that kind of made me sad because that's one of the things I like about Mr. Gross's novels is that they usually have like really detailed game mechanics throughout the entire novel, and this one just didn't have them as much. The main character, you actually see most of the game mechanics in the form like saving throws, informational name tags, like oh this is whatever superhero name, and like their PowerPoint levels, whatever. And you also get like some small descriptions when the main character uses those PowerPoints to get a new power. So I would have actually personally loved to see more game mechanic details in the story, but I understand that this is just a writing style choice. Some authors feel like the game mechanics get in the way of like the flow of the novel, which I can totally respect. Um, but the game mechanics are consistent in the story, and the main character grows according to those game rules. So it's totally lit RPG. You don't have to worry about that, but it is on the little lighter side for most of the novel. But again, all these game mechanics they're seriously front loaded. So there you go. The story is interesting. Again, 90% of it takes place in the game, where the main character is a vampire of color with healing power. So I thought it was an interesting combination between like damage and healing, and life exchange. It's kind of neat. But the game again, the main character is not particularly overpowered. It's just like a good planned skill based. And there are a good balance of like cool powers, but also disadvantages that are related to like the vampire thing. Can't go in the daylight too much, lose strength, vulnerable to holy damage, light, fire, that kind of stuff. But also has a bunch of cool vampire powers and kind of like I want to say directly healing, but it's like taking life force from one person and giving it to another person, which is an interesting way to be a healer. And the and that's mostly what the beginning part of the story is. The mid part of the story establishes who the villains in the story are, and this is going to be a little spoilery, so letting you know, the villains are white supremacists who want to get rid of all the people of color. There's the racism theme, and some people actually had, really enough, and the reviews had an issue with this. Like they thought it was like the main character going on a race hate binge. I'm like, no, that's not what the story is. It's about, it's very, I mean, again, like I said, part of this is social commentary about what's happening in the world currently, but it's the same thing as if there were Nazis. Like white supremacists and Nazis are kind of hard to root for. Like they're almost like a perfect villain in some ways, in that just about everybody can agree that is bad. Like wanting to eliminate everybody who's not of a certain skin color is kind of a bad thing, no matter what group it is. But that's there. And again, like later on the story, there's like a larger conspiracy that's revealed that was kind of cool, and also a nice little twist. And the end of the story honestly didn't end the way I thought it would be. It's not a super happy, nice, wrapped up story. Remember that this story goes. This is issue one, so he has to in issue two, three, four, whatever. And so the ending is not nice and tight wherever all the good guys win. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I liked it, but some people are not going to like that kind of ending. So just as an FYI. But if you're looking for a good RPG story that combines superheroes, I think this is a good read, and you might like it. I personally, again, would have loved more game mechanics, um, throughout like the mid and late of the story. But I think it's the writer's choice. I respect that. I also would have probably liked a little more variety of villains instead of the villains just being white supremacists. Throw in some variety. I don't know, some other kind of violence. I don't know. But like I said, small tiny complaint. I really had a good time. It probably would have gotten a better score if, like I said, those things had been there. But as it is, it gets a score 6 out of 10. And again, it was almost a 7 out of 10. Like it's like really super close. But I couldn't let go of the fact that just a little more variety and those game mechanics existing a little more in the story, just things that I personally enjoy, seeing and understanding about a game kind of world, just stopped it from being a 7 out of 10. But like I said, it was almost. So there you go. Okay, next one. 6. Okay. Shards of Reality, a little RPG novel, Enter the Realm Book 1, written by Timothy W. Long. Okay. This has a really short author description, so it's easy to read. It is Walter Lapointe and Oswald Blackwell just woke up inside of the online role-playing game Realms of Theloria, with no memory of how they arrived. Walt and Oz soon learn the hard way that living in an epic fantasy world isn't all it's cracked up to be. As level 1 characters with no skills or experience, nothing can prepare them for their new lives as they prepare to enter the realm. So there you go. It is 428 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, this is a trapped in the game story with a very slow build. And for the beginning portion of the story, you're actually not really sure if it's going to be trapped in the game or if it's a portal fantasy story, because there aren't a ton of game mechanics revealed in the very beginning of it. So just be aware of that. But that it is a trapped in the game story, so slight spoiler. And again, the game mechanics are slowly revealed. As a matter of fact, not all the game mechanics are actually revealed until like the middle of the story, like 55% is when like the last few mechanics are showed to both the reader and the characters. And it's justified to the reader and the character by saying, "Oh, this is a full immersion game; that it's still in the beta phase, and the characters need a level first to unlock all these different sections of like getting a user interface or seeing the level difference between yourself and the opponent, little things like that." And so that honestly a little bugged me a little bit, but not a ton, because the adventuring in the story is interesting and the characters have distinct personalities. So Walter, the main character, is generally likable, but he's also kind of a wimp when it comes to ladies and a show off, and he wants people to like him. Oswald is a grumpy kind of character. He, especially as the story goes on, and he really doesn't want to be in the game and he just wants to leave so much. But at the same time, he's super loyal to the people he considers friends. And later, the characters are joined by the third coworker, Carrion, who Walter has a super crush on, and together, for the most part, the story is like exploring the game world, um, and that, that their company has made, but also finding that things aren't exactly the same as it was for the like larger MMO that the rest of the world kind of plays. And that's essentially it for the first like 2/3 of the novel. It's like 66% of the novel. It's just these characters wandering around, wondering how they got there, because again, their memories are affected a little bit. Doing beginner quests, exploration of the game world, leveling up, and the gradual revelation of what those levels up gain them. Like at level 5, they get access to, or level 2, they get access to the user interface, stuff like that, and a bunch of character development stuff as well. At the 66% point, the trio finally get to go on their like the major plot of the story, and the rest of the novel is spent on that big quest line. Um, and again, it for some reason I disliked it though. I think what I really enjoyed about the novel is the attempt to portray realistically what it would be like to be transported to a medieval game world. That there are no hotkeys, so there's no hotkeys for characters to press act or skills to activate that way. Everything's hard in this world, and I mean really hard for these characters. Like I said, part of I think the appeal of the story is that it almost feels like portal fiction, and that characters are transported from our world, which is nice and technologically advanced, to a medieval world where all of our skills don't translate well, and we, as regular people, wouldn't have this, sword skills or rogue skills, or know how the social customs work in that world, and that is here in this story as well. Want to learn how to, swing a sword and upgrade your sword skill? You have to swing it and fight some characters and fight monsters, and the game skill is increased by actual use. Um, but also, fighting hurts when a monster bites you or stabs you. There's actual pain there, and the main characters really do flounder around in the beginning of the story, really struggling hard to even get any skills or any XP to level up. And I kind of like that approach. It was very appealing to me, at least as a reader. Overall, I enjoyed the novel. Again, I would have loved more details about the game world, but it really works well the way it is. So it's like I said, minor complaint. There is a super cliffhanger ending, so be aware of that. That is there as well. Some people are not gonna like that. It was okay with me though. For me, get the score 7 out of 10. I had a good time reading it. Okay, we're almost done, guys. Sorry. Number 7, the Elven Captive, complete collection. This one's a really easy review. I'll read you the author's description. The Elven Captive is a hot, new, erotic LitRPG adventure following the travels of Jason, who plays Hill Duran in the game. The series contains enslaved elven girls, hot taboo fantasy encounters, and MF scenes. 18 plus only. There's no page count. It just came out. It's a series of like smaller novels put together. It's probably not more than 100 pages, probably. $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited if you want to read it. But like so many other stories that have an emphasis on graphic sex and in a VR world, this is not actually lit RPG. It's really just a sex story set in a VR world, which is fine because that's part of what they're advertising. But it's most definitely doesn't have any RPG elements. There's barely any text besides the sex stuff. So if that's what you're into, go read it. But it's actually not lit RPG. So get the score 4 out of 10 because it's not what it says it is. In part. Okay. Next, we have, last but not least, The Star Dragon, written by Dante Doom. I share the full titles: The Star Dragon, a fantasy LitRPG, Dragons of the New World, Book 1, written by Dante Doom. Okay. This is 366 pages, 99 cents. It's probably a promotional price. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and again, the audiobook is out right now. And books 2 and 3 are scheduled to come out weeks apart in October, but I think they're ready now if the author wanted to do it. I'll explain this in a bit. The author's description: when the world is threatened, it's up to the players in a virtual world to save it. Van Valhusian doesn't see the point in ever leaving the beautiful digital world of the game that he loves, and for good reason. In the industrial wasteland he calls home, it is often the only way people can experience life's simplest pleasures. But his allegiance to the game is tested when an ambitious CIA agent named Sam, always Sang, that's all, there's a last name there, calls upon him to help as she goes undercover in the game to investigate Draco, the corporation responsible for creating the massively popular role-playing game Dragon Kings of the New World. Okay. Sang is a gifted hacker who feels nothing but contempt for those who waste their lives in what she sees as a false reality, but when people start dying in the game, she must find out why. Van, a talented gamer, is her guide to navigate the world, level up their newbie characters fast, and get into some of the most dangerous areas of the game. These are long sentences. He dreams of becoming a programmer sponsored by Draco one day, but his partnership with Sang threatens to expose secrets from his past that could jeopardize those plans. Now they have to put aside their difference to discover whoever is killing players, but the truth they find is darker than either of them imagined. So there you go. That's the author's description. Okay. First off, the author, Dante Doom, sent me a message earlier this month letting me know about his debut novel, Star Dragon Fantasy RPG, this novel here. Um, and so I went and purchased on Amazon, and I found that reading some of the game stuff, it it falls a little off. Um, and a perfect example. There's just a sentence only on the story that just sounded weird to me. If he completed this quest, that would mean yet another leveling up. And to me, that sounds weird. It's technically not incorrect, but it feels like it should be something like it would mean getting another level, or it would mean another level, which is a lot more gamer speak. I basically figured, oh, okay, maybe this author is a tabletop gamer and more in that realm instead of an RPG video gamer, which is totally cool. So I decided to look into the author and found that Dante Doom, might not actually exist, which is kind of weird. So part of this review is just my investigation into this author for some reason, which I totally kind of went on a tangent on. But basically, the author bio on Dante Doom describes him as someone who didn't touch a video game until his 23rd year when he started working at an arcade. Then last year, he found and fell in love with LitRPG. While on a 2-week holiday, he wrote this 366-page book. And the updated description on Amazon says that if the first novel does really well, gets below 500 paid on Amazon, then will actually release the other 2 novels immediately on September the 29th, which means he has 3 novels and an audiobook ready to go right now, which is really unusual for a new author who's independently publishing for the first time. And so that's kind of a break flat for me. Additionally, the author Facebook page that the author contacted me on for Dante Doom, which is a personal page, and also there's an author page as well. Um, but his Facebook presence is kind of non-existent. There, it's only existed for 6 months. He has no personal photos, handful of posts the entire time. And if there's one thing that the TV show Catfish has taught me, is that that kind of things is also suspect and a thing to look out for. When I actually looked at the beginning of the novel in the ebook, it actually shows the copyright doesn't go to Dante Doom, but out to Relay Publishers. Um, and a quick search of the name took me to their website, and I basically noticed that the artwork for Star Dragon, this novel, matches what Relay Published put out for another series of theirs, for Ava Richardson. And that at the end of this novel, there's promotional work for Ava Richardson. And like I said, it really shouldn't matter who wrote it or what publisher did. Um, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way that there possibly is deception. If I was going to guess at this, I was basically say that Dante Doom is a penning for another author who works for Really Publishing, which is not a big deal. But it's presented almost like a marketing scheme that this is an indie work by a gamer. And whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's kind of what it's being presented as. And if that's what this scheme is, it seems weird to me because it's almost completely necessary to kind of portray this a fictional character as an independent author. If you're working for a publisher who wants to get in RPG, that's fine. Just be honest about it. But if it's a deceptive practice, it kind of hurts the author's reputation and also the publisher's reputation with the community. So it seems weird to me. But it seems like an overly complicated, and that's kind of how the same way I felt about the novel. Yeah, there is an actual novel review as well. Um, the novel starts off as almost this detective thriller where the CIA sends an agent into the game, which is weird to me in the first place. But whatever, to investigate some murders tied to a popular virtual reality company. Um, and then it spirals into a weird search for evidence that aliens are trying to communicate with us through game glitches. Like literally, I'll explain a little bit, but like there's just this transition. It's like, oh, we're gonna get into the game to figure this out because we can investigate in real life and the evidence is in the game somewhere. And then again, literally within like a page, it's like, oh no, now we're looking for aliens. Ta-da! So like it's an overly unnecessarily complicated story sometimes. Um, Additionally, other things about the story that I didn't quite care for. The 2 main characters are really hard for me to care about. The CIA agent thinks all gamers are, again, this is actual text, losers, pigs, and unachievers. And her guide in the MMO is a burnt out gamer who, give me ad, who doesn't want to be there, but has to because the CIA agent, CIA has dirt on him. So, and he's also kind of a whiny character. The actual game mechanics of the story, they're solid, they're consistent. This is actually lit RPG. There's no question about that whatsoever. Um, But this story is supposed to take place in the far-flung future where virtual reality has been perfected, but the game mechanics feel super, super dated, like they were pulled from a game from the early 2000s, or maybe from like a tabletop game. And so even the game mechanics feel a little out of place within the story sometimes. And the first half of the novel, like literally the first 50% of the story, is almost like an escort mission for the gamer and the CIA agent, in that he's power leveling her, and he has to explain every single little detail. Like, oh, what is the quest? Oh, that person, has a question mark over that. We should go talk to them, and skip dialogue, and skip dialogue. And literally, that's what the gamer says, to skip through all the beginning dialogue of the story, so you actually miss a lot of the flavor text of the quest they do. And he's literally trying to power level her and have to explain every single like detail about the story, about like beginning game mechanics. And it kind of got annoying really quickly, because not only is he explaining them, but he's explaining them in a rush. And so he's not allowing for natural exploration and understanding of game mechanics of the story. So it got, again, just some things there. And again, the story uh, abandons the plot of the murder, like midway through the story, and literally just turns into this search for evidence of aliens. I'm like, where does that come from? Um, so there you go. There are some, like I said, not all the story is bad. There are very interesting moments occasionally. And again, a lot of the questing stuff is they're quirky, they're fighting, they're arguing, there's banter and all that good stuff. But most of the plot doesn't really make sense. Like there are some huge, huge plot holes. Like just about every time something was said either in the real world or in the game world. Um, as far as the plot goes, I always like dozens of questions pop. I'm like, how can that exist? This doesn't make sense. And that happens throughout the entire novel. So the gaming stuff, while good, um, really solid mechanic wise, doesn't actually really matter to the plot either. Like it just kind of exists there for the bigger alien thing to exist in the murder thing, I guess. The plot kind of advances itself regardless of what they've done as far as their questing goes or levels go for the CIA agent and the gamer. So that's also an issue. Overall, the story was kind of a meh for me. That plus the world, and like I said, I don't know that this is actually the case. Dante Doom might actually be a real person, but it's my suspicion that he's not, rather a creation from the Relay Publishing, mostly because of like getting cover art is expensive, audiobook production is expensive, um, all that stuff is there. And I wrote to the author. He said, "Oh, I got help from Relay Publishing to do this," but all that stuff is there is like thousands and thousands of dollars, including like the marketing, creating a website, and it just feels weird that a publisher would help a new author out for free, if he wasn't like an employee. And like I said, that just left a kind of a bad taste in my mouth because it feels slightly deceptive. Um, but that's just me. Like I said, it could be entirely my imagination. Um, but that also kind of ruined like the small moments of enjoyment. Like throughout reading the story, I kept thinking like, I can't believe this is what's happening. So there you go. But for me, it gets a score of 4 out of 10. The end. So there you go. That's it, folks. That's it. We're done. Like I said, new kind of slightly different formatting for the podcast, making my editing life a little bit easier. Used to take me about 4 hours after recording the show to do editing and adding all these graphics, and now hopefully it should take me about half an hour. Cross our fingers. So hopefully a better format for everybody. But that's it for the show. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, um, YouTube, Patreon, all those good places. And you can find all the ways to support us on litrpgpodcast.com/support. But until we can hang out again, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some literature. Goodbye, everybody.